you're on.
And we're on. Hi, everybody. Welcome to NonSequitur. Shit, I can't remember. I can't remember if we're switching places or not, Steve.
I haven't seen where we're at yet. So
I'm Steve McRae.
Oh, we are switched. Okay.
All right, good. I'm Steve McRae. That's
And I'm
Kyle Curtis.
I'm Kyle today.
Now remember, his Kyle's birthday is in 3.5 hours. So this is what happens when he went from 31 to 32.
He didn't age well at all.
Not at all. He crashed and burned.
Should have taken his vitamins.
Is that what it is, Steve?
I think, hey, by the way, people have already noticed the sighting here, and they're already lost their minds. So it's okay.
Oh, have they really?
Yes.
I'm coming in that chat as soon as we get this debate started. So play nice. We did this on purpose, actually, but I'm glad that it worked already.
We wanted to see who would be triggered, and guess who we triggered? Ocean.
Ah, of course, my Viking prince. Sorry, man. Well, as always, welcome to NonSequitur. I think I'm Kyle Curtis, and I think that's Steve McRae, and I think that Dave is producing. And Dave has not had a really good past 2 days on here, has he?
He really hasn't.
He's angry. We stressed him out, but thank you, Dave, as always, for the wonderful job that you do. And then joining us also, we have the Wizz, not as in Wizz.
Hello.
The smart Wizz Biz, and we have Godless Engineer. Or I'm so sorry, Godless Engineer. Tonight we are joined by Godless Engine Queer.
Well, yeah, I changed it to Ingequeer. It seems to flow nicely, so Ingequeer.
Well, welcome, Ingequeer.
Thank you.
Listen, we have to do that. We have to do that over again because you didn't do your thing.
So Kyle really is advancing this.
Okay, hold on. Let me do it. What's up, heathens? How y'all doing?
The gay agenda right there.
Stop.
Oh, excellent.
I can't hear anymore.
Wow.
Well, right in front of your eyes, people. He is changing to be gay.
Wow.
It is a choice.
Wow, you can do dirty things with that thing.
He says he doesn't.
What is happening?
This is going south really fast.
I've already forgotten what we're here to discuss.
Morality of all things.
Oh, fantastic. That is so fitting. Before we do, I'm going to put up a card to show what we have going on tomorrow. Now, originally, we were going to have a kind of birthday stream with, all of our favorite people coming in. Also celebrating hitting 10K and over 1 million views. But we're going to move that to Friday. Of course, Godless Engineer and the Wizz, if you want to, too. You're all welcome to stop in and hang out. But we're moving it for a really big reason. And as many of you remember, and actually he has a piece coming on CBS News. I believe he said either this weekend or next weekend, but CBS Morning News or Sunday News did a piece on this gentleman. Now, he got notoriety about 2.5 months ago for being it was to raise money to get
he wants to go up like several miles above the 62. Yeah. He wants to go like to the Kármán line or something.
Yeah,
which is 62.5 miles above the earth, and he's raising awareness for it.
Yeah. Now we spoke with him me, Steve, Aaron Ra, spoke with him on a Saturday. That video is in our videos. This Mad Mike Hughes calls into NonSequitur, and we spoke with him then. Now he is also running for governor of California. Got a lot going on, but I spoke with Mike about Steve messaged him this morning. I spoke with him on the phone about 4 hours ago. He has agreed to come on tomorrow, so he will be with us. He'll be joining us tomorrow at 8 Eastern, and he's taking a really, really strange position, especially if you're running for political office. I'm going to let Steve explain what he's coming on to talk about, but now we will be talking about all of that because he did go up in the rocket. He did holds the record for well, I'll let him tell it because I'm not exactly sure what the record exactly says, but we'll talk about that and get into that with him. But I'm gonna let Steve just tell you what he's coming on to debate.
Yeah, I think he holds the record for the self-propelled rocket. I mean, he put himself like 1,800 feet in the air, not just once, but twice. He's done it twice. But he's going to come on to discuss the topic that troops in the military should basically be abolished. That if he becomes governor, he wants to try to eliminate troops, and is against any military of any kind. I've tried to suss out with him what he meant by that. It was something he messaged me several hours ago, and so I haven't really had a formal discussion with him about it yet, but that's his standpoint. So he wants to come on and try to argue that with somebody.
So we will be joined by Mad Mike Hughes again tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern to talk about his journey through the rocket. We spoke with him prior to him going up into the rocket. So, and actually it got delayed because we spoke to him on a Saturday. He was supposed to go up on a Tuesday and didn't wind up going up for 3 more weeks, something like that. But,
yeah, we had. If people remember, we talked to Mad Mike Hughes on the NSS with Aaron Ra. As a matter of fact.
Yeah. So join us for that. That'll be a big to do, and then you can catch his CBS Sunday morning news piece. I believe it's this weekend because he said that he just got done wrapping up filming for that. So, all right, I'm going to let Steve now introduce the topic for tonight and what we're going to be talking about. If you're a Patreon, number one, thank you. And number two, we have one of our private hangouts this Saturday. It's always a good time to join us for that. That's going to be at 4:00 on Saturday. Also, any super chats that you put through, all of them are read live on the show. So they will appear in the little box in between Steve and I. And then once the debate, or this is a discussion, once the discussion is concluded, we will read all of those out. So without further ado, let's get into it.
All right. Well, today, I thank you guys for joining us on such short notice. We did have some other things planned today. Unfortunately, they did fall through. So I want to thank you both, Godless Engineer and Wizz, for doing this so short notice. So today we're going to be talking about objective morality. We're going to have objective moral realism versus moral anti-realism, with Godless Engineer taking the anti-realist approach and the Wizz taking the moralistic realistic approach, or moral realism. So Wizz, you haven't been on NonSequitur Show before, so why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe tell them a little bit about your position, and then we'll have Godless Engineer do the same.
All right, cool. So I am a moral realist. I do take the position of morality being objective, or at least can be. My stance is essentially that what constitutes right and wrong is what is interest of well-being. This assessment is like contingent upon like whether or not we agree well-being is a correct or proper foundation. And once we can agree on that, like we can assess based on that standard what can be objectively moral. So.
Okay, and Godless Engineer, welcome back. Probably like one of the most reoccurring persons we have on here.
It's got to be his 12th appearance, I think.
Yeah, it's got to be at least. I mean, I think I know he's beaten Arn, so yeah. So people don't know who you are by now. Tell them who you are, but they should.
Right. So I'm Godless Engineer, despite what my little name tag says whenever I talk. So I'm Godless Engineer. I have a channel here called Godless Engineer. You can go over there and subscribe if you want to. I do a lot of just response videos and comment videos and all that other stuff. So if you want to go check that out, I'd appreciate it. As far as my position goes, I take the moral. I don't. I guess I'm a little against how you characterized it, Steve, as being anti-realist. I'm not saying that that's a wrong way to characterize it, but I guess I prefer moral relativist, but that's neither here nor there. So I take the position of moral relativism. I feel that morality is relative. It's relative to, I guess whatever group of people that you're working with. I feel that it's a subjective stance that is innately subjective, regardless of whatever starting point that you take. And in order to do what Wizz mentioned a second ago, which is that we should all agree that well-being is a proper foundation, that in and itself is an assumption, is starting from a subjective assumption that we just all happen to agree with. And I don't disagree that there are objective things like a group of people agreeing that one thing is considered good and a group of people agreeing that one thing is considered bad. But in order to define what is good, what is bad, what things what things are good and what things are bad, I think that you have to take a subjective stance to that in order to make your argument. So I feel that it's a very innately subjective, and that's the position that I hold.
Okay. So how about we just dive into it? Now, I've actually put the link in the video description of the terms we generally use in the Great Debate community. I sent it to you guys prior, so if you guys want to use those things, that's great. If you have your own way of doing it, you can use it. Just let us know. But if people want to follow along and they don't understand what they're talking about, go to the video description, go to the link to the Great Debate Community Wiki, and there's a little brief synopsis of what do these terms mean, like moral relativism and subjectivism, so people can kind of follow along. They're not familiar with these terms. But generally speaking, the moral realist is the proposition. However, it's completely up to you if you want to take that or not. GE.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I mean,
moral realism is, I'm sorry, Wizz, you have moral realism. So generally, moral realism is the proposition. Do you want to take that?
Yes.
Okay. It's all yours.
All mine? All right. Well, so I completely agree that the foundation of well-being is subjective. Like, agreeing upon that foundation is dependent on our personal feelings or thoughts. But once we do agree on that foundation, we can assess morals based on that. What am I trying to get at here? We can assess whether certain morals are in the interest of well-being, and if they are in the interest of well-being, I would consider them right, and if they weren't, I would consider them wrong. So that's basically what I'm trying to get at. And over to you.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I get that you're kind of starting off by saying that we need to agree that well-being is the foundation in which that you have to judge things to be objective. But I feel like that's just sort of moving the goalposts almost, and just moving the word objective, or what we consider to be objective, into a realm that you can call objective. I know that this is kind of like Sam Harris's argument, which personally I feel like he just redefines what objective means and what objective is in order to say that some morals are objective. And it's not that I disagree with the foundation that you're talking about here. It's not that I disagree with that. I just see the inherent subjectivity of your prior assumptions, which makes the rest of your argument inherently subjective. And I mean, you can tell how this is inherently subjective, because even the whole, well-being, of I guess conscious creatures, I think is what Sam Harris says. If you consider that, then across time we've got different definitions of what that means. So I guess I just feel like it's pushing it into our current definitions. Like, we're using our current definition of what it means to be, the well-being of conscious creatures. And you're saying, well, now this is objective. And I disagree with that because at some point, our definition of well-being could change in the future. So I don't see the point in saying, oh, now this is objective. And then you advance the timeline 50 years or so, and it's like, well, new information's come about. We have a new idea of what well-being is. Therefore, now this is objective. Do you understand how that kind of makes the word objective like lose its meaning, at least as far as I understand the word? So if you mean objective in a different way, could you elaborate on that?
Well, so I sort of understand what you're getting at. I am using the word objective as Steve has graciously linked us. I can read it off here. Objective morality in this context would be what is right or wrong, irrelevant of someone's personal feelings or opinions. So that's kind of how I'm using the word right now.
Well, I mean, I understand that that's the objective morality, but I asked, like, how you were considering something to be objective. Like, for instance, I consider the number of Tic Tacs in a box to be objective because that's something physical that I can measure and whatnot. Whereas morality and all these other things are more abstract ideas that we can't necessarily measure in that way. So I don't feel like morality in general can be objective, considering we can't actually like measure it unless we box it in with a subjective boundary that we have predetermined.
Well, I would just say to that that's a different objective than like it's a different like use of the word objective than I'm referring to. So like I'm talking about objective not in the sense that it's empirical or based on independently verifiable facts. It's just I guess we'd have to define right and wrong because I'm just defining it as it's defined as on the Great Debate Community Wiki, what is right or wrong or relevant of someone's personal feelings or opinions. So I don't want to define it and use it as in as like something being objective would be based upon independently verifiable points of data, facts, or empirical data. I want to do it in like the context of morality, in which it would be the opposite of subjectivity. And yeah.
Well, but do you not see how saying that, well, we all agree on this one particular foundation, do you not see how that kind of violates the whole regardless of other people's feelings? Because, well, I mean, if we're already agreeing on this foundation, then it's not regardless of how everybody feels. It's perfectly in line with how everybody feels.
Right, which is why, as I noted, the whole agreeing on this foundation is subjective, right? So our agreement on this is dependent on our personal feelings or opinions. But once we get past that, we can start assessing things based on the standard, whether or not they're right or wrong. And
but sorry, go ahead.
And that would be irrelevant of our opinions or personal feelings. That's the assessment, not the foundation.
Well, no, I understand that, but what I'm saying is that the foundation itself is subjective.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I agree.
Okay, but I mean, do you not see how that kind of poisons the rest of your argument?
I do not.
Well, I mean, if we have a subjective base that we're working off of, and then anything built off of that is going to be inherently subjective.
Well, not necessarily.
Real quick, Wizz, if I can ask, can you like back off your mic a little bit? I think you're a little bit too close, and you're clipping and kind of popping.
Yeah, sorry about that. I can move it away. All right, all set. I mean, I don't really have anything to say right now. My foundation subjective, but I don't think that necessarily means the assessment based on that standard would be inherently subjective.
I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
So my like whether or not our foundation is well-being would be subjective. It's dependent on our personal opinions, right? But I don't think that inherently means our assessment based on that standard would be dependent on our personal feelings or opinions.
Well, I mean, I would disagree with that because, I mean, if you're already agreeing on this, I guess, generalized topic, then any discussion that you have after that is still contained within this subjective foundation that you've already built. Regardless of whether somebody already believes that whatever you're discussing is within that foundation, you're still arguing within that foundation. So, I mean, you're I would think that the objective morality would be able to circumvent any kind of foundation that you set or any kind of subjective box that you put around the conversation. I feel like objective would be like either morally good or morally bad, regardless of this foundation. But it seems to me like you've pushed it seems to me like you've pushed it into a place where that kind of objective, I guess, can't exist, or it just doesn't cover. So I don't know if that's making any sense.
I mean, again, like I see where you're getting at, but it's the whole thing where, well, I don't want to keep repeating myself. I mean,
well, I understand. I'm not meaning to make you repeat yourself, but
no, it's not you. It's just like I'm trying to maybe figure out some better ways to say this. But so my foundation is that what is objective is dependent on what is in the interest of well-being and what is not in the interest of well-being. And the subjectivity comes into play of whether or not we agree on well-being being a like objective standard we should use, and our process or our determination of whether or not we do agree on that would be dependent on our personal opinions, and so it would thus be subjective, if that makes any sense.
Wait, so at what point does it become subjective?
It becomes subjective when we choose to agree or not agree that the interest of well-being would be objectively good, and the disinterest in well-being would be objectively bad. Agreeing on well-being would be subjective, whether or not we agree on that.
Okay. So we're using the definition that Steve linked, being that objective morality is morality that is good or bad, regardless of how you feel about it.
Right.
But at the same time, you're telling me that we have to start from a base of how people feel about it.
No, so we're starting from the subjectivity is determining a standard that we should use, not necessarily the morality, if that makes any sense.
Well, yeah, but I mean, we're already employing how people feel about a certain thing in order to establish how we judge things to be objectively morally good or bad.
Sure.
So I mean I could draw like let's say you had a machine right on an assembly line, right? Let's say the first machine in your line produces a faulty part. Then as you go through the assembly line, I mean, you're working with a faulty part through the entire thing. It infects the entire argument or the entire conversation.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is that machine is separate from the rest of the machine in a way where it doesn't influence it, if that makes any sense. So the subjectivity of agreeing on a standard that we should use is not influential of the objectivity we use to assess things based on that standard.
Well, yeah, but I mean, yeah, you keep going back to the the objective part, obviously, but I mean, it's the objective part is supposed to be regardless of how people feel about it or how an individual person feels about it. And I feel like any position where you base it off of an agreement upon people of how they feel about it, it doesn't make the morality that you struck or that you design afterwards, it doesn't make it objective. It just makes it subjective on the basis of that foundation.
All right. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'll bring up an example here. Here's like one of the easiest examples: is murder right or wrong? Right. So, based on objective morality, murder is wrong or relevant of what my personal opinion is. It is we can assess that it is not in the interest of well-being, and that is independent of my personal opinions. But whether or not we use well-being as a standard would be dependent on my opinions.
Okay. But still, you're working off of a foundation where people already agree that they feel that it's wrong to go out and murder somebody.
Right. So I guess I don't understand the problem with that.
Well, because there's the objective fact that people agree that something is wrong, but then there's whether or not that is objectively wrong to think that. I mean, you can transplant this same argument throughout history, just in different time periods. We had a different idea of what well-being was 300 years ago or so. Back during the I guess the Wild Wild West days or whatnot. I mean, in the unregulated portions of the country, it wasn't really seen as bad or wrong to like have a gunfight where one person murders another person. And so like we can judge that as being wrong now, because right now we have a foundation, a subjective foundation that would be wrong. But if you judge it by the common consensus of like the society at the time or the area that you're in, that wouldn't necessarily violate well-being.
Right, but doing so, we would have to be using, like, we would have to assess it based on our personal feelings or opinions. If we took all of history, we could assess it based on standards or tools that are not dependent on personal feelings or opinions. So that's what I'm trying to get at, I guess.
Okay. Well, I get. I don't understand how that answers my dilemma that I pointed out here of the fact that at certain times in history we have considered the definition of well-being to be a certain definition, which is very subjective to what the people felt at the time, and then judging that from now, we have a different concept of well-being. So how can we say that right now we have objective morality based on our subjective foundation? But then they also had some kind of objective morality that was based on their own subjective foundation. I would think that objective morality would transcend that barrier of the subjective foundation.
Right, and I understand what you're saying a lot better now. I can't, and I want to try to make my point a little bit clearer, but I'm still stuck on the whole where our foundation, that the subjectivity of our foundation, agreeing upon our foundation, I'm still stuck on the fact that that's separate from assessing things based on that foundation, which would be objective. But I mean,
well, I get I get that you're making that distinction, but what I'm saying is I feel like that is a misunderstanding of what it means to be objective.
all right. I mean, all right. I got nothing for you.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm really not trying to be difficult, but I really don't see how that version of objective actually makes it objective. When, throughout time we have different, foundations of well-being that you could apply to those times. So, I mean, I guess that's where I'm not getting it. I don't know if anybody else wants to step in to try to help me understand it, because I do want to understand. I mean, if objective morality really does exist, I do want to be convinced by an argument.
Well,
I'm not.
From here, I feel like you're kind of using a different definition, but I don't know.
Well, I disagree, because the definition is that it's regardless of how people feel, as to whether or not something's morally bad or good. And I'm saying that you can't hold to that definition while relying on a foundation that is based on how, like how people feel about a certain definition, or how people feel about a certain status. So
I think for clarification, I've been asked to clarify on this. When we're talking about objectivity, a lot of times it does get conflated with things like being not biased. Like in subject, you say, in science, you say, I have an objective standpoint. I have some objectivity in the experiment, right? That's not how it's used in moral context, though. Objectivity, or being objective, means that a proposition is true independent of anybody's personal beliefs or mind dependent. It is mind independent in this case. That's what the objective moral standpoint is, the more realist position, right? The more anti-realist position would say there are moral facts. A moral relativist or moral subjectivist tends to say there are moral facts. They're just contingent upon either the individual, which would be moral subjectivism, or on the culture, which is moral relativism, which you said you were before. So you would be promoting the position that there are moral facts, but they're contingent upon the culture, either what's called cultural relativism or descriptive moral relativism.
Well, right. And I wasn't, I get before that some people were saying that I was using the entirely wrong definition of objective because of my comparison with like the Tic Tacs and whatnot. But I wasn't trying to use like an objective, like, I don't have a bias. I meant objective, like I have a box and it has a certain number of Tic Tacs in it. How do we know how many Tic Tacs are in there? You open it up, you count them, and you can count them 1, 2, 3, and that's regardless of how anybody else would perceive that, because there's 3 Tic Tacs that are sitting there on the table. So, I mean, that's what I mean by objective. And I would agree that there are objective facts. Like, I would agree that it's a morally objective fact that, like, killing somebody is bad. But then again, we both have the same subjective foundation in which to work off of. So that's inherently subjective in my worldview, at least, in order to say that. Which, I mean, I'm fine with it, because morality is an abstract subject that isn't concrete. So it's not like we can take it out of the box and we can actually count up anything in it or anything like that. It's abstract. So we have to start off from a subjective, like, view of things where we all agree on a certain idea or foundation.
Well, let me ask the Wizz here, because Godless here makes a really good point. One of the things that is an argument against moral realism is the fact that we have no way to know what the actual moral facts are. We have no way to access them, right? We don't know if they exist. Are they not naturalistic facts or they're non-naturalistic facts? And let me clarify, because people really tend to screw this up. Naturalistic facts and non-naturalistic facts do not mean supernatural. That's not what it means in the moral context. All it means is a natural fact would be something relating to, like, pain or feelings or happiness or pleasure. Those are naturalistic facts. So if you say good is something that makes you happy, then you're appealing to naturalism, and that's called a naturalistic fallacy, actually, for that reason. a
Right.
non-naturalistic approach of being good defined in other ways, because defining good is very, very difficult. It's called the open question argument. So he makes a very good point to you, is how, if moral realism does exist, how do you access those facts? How do you have moral knowledge? Because you're, as a moral anti-realist, you're arguing the position that moral knowledge, there isn't any, right?
Right. So it goes back again to a standard that we have to agree on, and the process of agreeing on that would be subjective, right? But once we achieve that standard and have that standard, we can then make assessments regarding reality about what would be right or wrong, and that would be independent of personal feelings or opinions. It just goes back to that.
Okay, so let me ask you both this, because people have been asking me for this. Okay, if you're both arguing from the position that morals facts exist, is that correct?
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the content, people always say that people can confuse the content of the belief with the belief itself. The content of the belief is like 1 + 1 = 2. That's a fact, not a moral fact, but it's an analytical fact that everybody agrees 1 + 1 = 2. Now, subjectively, somebody can say, you know what, I don't believe that. You can get a flat earther in here and say, you know what, I don't believe that, and they probably really mean it, right? Because they don't know math. But just because you're having a subjective evaluation of something doesn't change the the objectivity or the objectiveness of the content itself. That is objective.
Right. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Okay, because I think you're kind of wording it weird, Wiz.
Yeah.
I have a couple philosophy people
right.
thinking that you're kind of wording it, Wiz, and I'm having to agree with them.
But what you just explained is what I'm trying to get at.
Okay. I wasn't sure. That's why I wanted to reframe it. I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but I wanted to reform it in a way that was a little more cogent.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Do you want to address that at all, G?
Well, I guess not, because I mean, I still stand that on the position that when we all agree that a certain thing is a moral fact and that moral fact is true, then we're starting from a subjective position. So I mean, it's a little hard for me to be convinced that it's objective when it wholly takes into it, like the main thing that it takes into account is how people feel about that particular moral fact.
No, I totally get what you're saying, but I see what's going on. I think. Let me see if I can suss that a little bit. Because we can pick. Okay, generally, objective morality deals a lot with goals, right? You ought to do something for a particular goal, and you're saying because the goal is subjective, we can randomly pick anything. Therefore, it makes the rest of it all subjective. There's a position called like that, subjective. I think it's called subjective reductionism, because it starts off from subjectivity. Everything follows the subjectivity. Something that cosmic skeptic kind of argues. Is that your position?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I agree with Cosmic Skeptic on his assessment of it. And I mean, logically, I think it would make sense if you think about like a mathematical problem. If you make a mistake early on, it poisons the rest of your problem. Like it'll poison your answer and you won't get the right answer. So I guess given what we're considering objective morality to be here, if your objective morality is based on how people feel about the foundation or how people feel in general, how can it really be like objective?
Okay, well, you want to tackle that one?
Right. So I wouldn't say it's based on how people feel about something. I'm talking about so objective morality would be based on a standard, right? A standard that is evaluated, formulated by the agreement people will have, and that the process of agreeing with something is dependent on personal feelings or opinions, which would be subjective. And so it's not dependent on, my objectivity wouldn't be dependent on how people feel about something.
You're popping.
It would be dependent on a standard about how people, a standard formulated that is, and the formulation, like the process of agreeing to use that standard would be subjective, if that makes any sense. I'm sorry.
I'm not sure. G, does that make sense to you?
Well, I feel like it's the same point that you've kind of been
Right.
talking about here, is that the foundation doesn't actually make like the argument or whatever. Like the foundation doesn't dictate the rest of the discussion or whatnot. But I mean, if we're starting, like, for instance, if we start off on a foundation where part of that foundation in the well-being, it's let's say it's getting slapped every day at 2 p.m. Okay, let's say that that's part of that well-being, but then you have people that disagree with that, and over time more and more people disagree with that, and then all of a sudden we have a new like foundation in which to say, oh, that is morally wrong to slap somebody. Okay, so what I see is that you're starting off on a subjective foundation, and then you're having this conversation based off of that subjective foundation, which makes any moral facts that you agree is good or bad subjective inherently, until you change that moral foundation, and then you're just arguing for a new set of objective facts. And I feel like that violates the whole concept of being objective.
Do you get that? What he was saying there, Wiz?
Again, yeah.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to make sure you're getting it, Wiz. Because I don't know if you're actually arguing the right position here. What he's saying is, if you start with a subjective thing, even if your goals are going to be objective, the whole thing that follows after that.
Right. I get what he's saying.
Would be, that doesn't matter, actually. That's what the moral realist would say. The moral realist would say,
and I that's what I've been trying to articulate, is that the fact that the process of agreeing on this foundation is subjective is irrelevant to the assessment of morals based on that based on that standard. The subjectivity is irrelevant to the assessment, which would be objective.
Okay,
using the definition.
Okay, so let's take a moral foundation of a certain time period or whatnot. Let's say the moral foundation that existed within let's say Islam in the Middle East, let's say a couple hundred years ago or so, where even to today they find child marriages to be perfectly fine and within their definition of well-being. So for them in their conversation on moral objectivism, they would feel that it's objectively good to marry a 9-year-old kid and to copulate that marriage with a 9-year-old kid. This is an agreed upon foundation within that society. They're arguing, they agree with each other that this is okay. Does that make it objectively good?
Well, right. So the problem there would be how we would define well-being and what that would mean. Not, it wouldn't be like.
But I mean, it's supposed, like, the objective morality is supposed to be regardless of what other people think or feel. So how can that be objective?
Well,
I get the. Sorry, go ahead.
So what you're getting at is that they have. I think what you're getting at is societies like that would have their own definition of well-being, or think what they're doing is in the interest of well-being. And my argument against that would be, or my claim against that would be, that they're wrong. We can that would not be in the interest of well-being. I guess that just
would that not be your subjective opinion based on your own subjective foundation?
Well, no, because I would hopefully be able to use reality to bring about facts that we can assess what would be well-being and what wouldn't be well-being, if that makes any sense.
Well, aren't those moral facts that we agreed upon? Isn't that a subjective that we agree that those are moral? That those are moral facts? I mean, I think that
the process of agreeing would be subjective.
Well, right, but what I'm trying to point out here is that going across different cultures and again across different time periods, you have these different foundations of what well-being would be considered. So basically, you have one moral foundation that's judging another totally different moral foundation, which entirely relies on how one foundation feels about the set of moral facts or opinions.
I mean, I agree with you, I think. But yeah.
Okay, how is that object? Because it seems to me like you're redefining objective to not mean, you know.
Well, I'm trying to use the definition that on the community wiki, but I don't know.
I understand that, and
Right.
Stop me if I'm using the wrong definition, but it's my understanding that the definition is it's objective morality is a morality that is regardless of how people feel necessarily,
right. So
on a
it's
certain moral fact.
yeah. So it's what's good or bad, independent of how people feel about it.
Well, right.
You're right. So yeah.
But you see, you're judging another culture based on how you feel about their set of like moral facts that they've chosen to consider objective.
Right, and as I explained, I would hope that would be based on facts about reality. So it'd be, but I get what I understand where you're getting at.
Well, right, but I mean, even then, you're subjectively constraining it to like facts of reality, because like one person may consider something not a fact of reality. Because I mean, I'm fairly certain those cultures would not consider it a fact of reality that it's bad to pork a 9-year-old. They wouldn't consider that. They would think that it's objectively fine or good or neutral, I guess, to marry and copulate with a 9-year-old kid. So, I mean, you're basically having one foundation judge another foundation based on how you feel about a certain thing, and I feel like that poisons your argument.
Right, and I don't think that's quite right. It's hard to get at for me, but I do agree with what you're saying. Not necessarily that it poisons my whole argument, but I understand what your objection is, and I don't really know where to go from there.
I mean, you guys want to kind of wrap it up a little bit? I mean, and this is, I don't know where it's kind of going. I would like to actually know your actual positions. I mean, as far as, because Wizz, I don't really know yours per se. I mean, he's a moral.
Well, yeah, I have a
objectivist, but you are more realist, but you're obviously more cognitivist, right? So
right, definitely.
So I mean, for people that don't get this, maybe we can kind of explain to them these things, since maybe the discussion's kind of over at this point, I think. Or do you guys want to continue on?
I've enjoyed what me and Godless engineer have done so far, and I do agree with what he's saying, but I think our difference here is just how that affects the everything that goes, everything in which. So we agree that my foundation's subjective, but we don't quite agree that like necessarily affects the objectivity of the rest of my argument, I guess. But I mean, we've kind of just been repeating stuff, so if we want to end it, that'd be fine with me.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I like the conversation so far too.
Right.
And I mean, I appreciate having these kind of conversations. So I appreciate you coming on here and discussing this with me. And I would agree that we're kind of at an impasse of whether or not the subjective nature of the foundation poisons the rest of the conversation that you would have around moral facts.
Right. And this was pretty last minute for me, so
yeah, no doubt.
I don't want to make excuses, but if I don't know. if I'd love to maybe like do this again at some time and have like write down a lot of notes and stuff. But
Sure.
I enjoyed this.
How about we do this? We got some super chats, and then if people want to ask some questions, does that be cool?
All right, cool.
All right. You're actually logged into that account right now. Do you want to read them off, Kyle?
Yeah. Can you get the first one that came up? I can do these two that I see right now, but there was one that came up at the very beginning.
I have to relog out to do that. Actually, I'm on
okay. Well, let me ask this one first. Would objective morality tend towards self-interest over time? That's number one.
I would answer that by saying if self-interest would be generally well-being, I guess that would be my answer. If self-interest would be considered well-being, then possibly.
You're popping again, by the way.
Is that definition of well-being though static?
I would say yes. I would say yes, but
sorry, go ahead.
I would say yes, but I would need to really do a whole bunch of research, and I'd love to like articulate this more, but I would say yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, the only thing that I would ask about that is, has this idea of what well-being is remained static across time? That's
right, and I get that, and I guess I say yes, but I mean, I feel like it would necessarily be dependent on certain facts about reality that may change. So that's
would you not agree though? The form is if you want X, then do Y. If X changes, then the Y will change in accordance.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Changes, then the ought that's corresponding that which is going to change to something else, making it a different proposition in relationship to what your goal is.
Right. That's what I'm trying to get at, I guess.
All right. The next question: is it possible to say that rape is objectively wrong, given that consent is entirely subjective, and if so, how?
Well, again, it would be possible if, in fact, that would be in the disinterest of well-being, and I think it would be. So we could assess that with facts, hopefully, and make a determination. But yeah.
Can you back up for your mic just a little bit more? You're still getting that popping breathy noise.
Sorry. All right.
Okay. No problem, man. Dude, we all find that sweet spot, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Did you want to tag in on that?
Yeah. I got the two earlier ones. If you want me to do them.
Yeah, but let me see if Godless wants to tag in on that.
Yeah,
right. Well, I mean, I kind of feel like the question kind of has some inherent problems because, like, rape is when consent is not given. So that is kind of like taking the subjectivity out of consent. It like whether or not somebody has consented could be a subjective idea. But I mean, as far as actual rape goes, I think that it would be like, that's definitely, it's not given. But if we're talking about like consent in general and how subjective that could be, I think that's a lot deeper of a question that I'm not too entirely sure on. I would agree based on my own morally relative worldview that we could all agree that sex without consent is rape, and that rape harms the well-being of whoever's being raped. So therefore, it would not be in the interest of well-being overall. But I also agree that that's a subjective view, and I'm fine with it.
Okay. Steve, you want to read the one from earlier before I get to?
Yeah, Ethan? I got two actually from earlier. One, hi, Christy from Blue. Is that like a love note or something?
Uh-oh.
$2 said hi to you, so he's got hearts.
Let me find out.
Heart, hi, Christy. Heart. Oh, love connection. We might have another.
You get to say that you met on the Non-Sequitur Show. Yeah. How great is that?
We better be invited. Yeah,
to the wedding.
name your first kid if it's a boy, Steve or Kyle. That's all we ask.
Keeve. That's his name.
Keeve. And Ethan says, is health inherently subjective then? We base good health on a subjective goal and compare healthy and sick people objectively. So he's wondering if health is somehow inherently a subjective idea. What it means to be healthy. But again, I think
is that for me or?
It's either you, but
yeah, I figured
fallacy. I'm not sure. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I figured I'd let you go first, Wiz, since you kind of took the point on the other ones.
All right. Well, I mean, I would not call that subjective. I don't understand the question exactly, but we know we have verifiable facts regarding reality in which we can determine what it would be healthy and what wouldn't be healthy for certain individuals. Because it is some individuals, well, most individuals, what's healthy for them is different than what's healthy for another person. And so we can still objectively verify what would be healthy for them and what wouldn't be healthy for them, if that answers the question.
And I would answer that with saying that, yeah, I think that it is a subjective kind of view, because while we could agree on certain moral facts, like shooting a person in the head isn't conducive to well-being, I still think that the conversation on the whole is very much a subjective conversation. As our knowledge changes, we are able to have more informed conversations, and that entails us having different foundations at different times. So it would be an inherently subjective thing to talk about, not only through time, but also relative to who the person was in which, the health was being discussed.
Okay.
Any other super chats?
No, not from my end.
All right. Well, do you want to just try to take some questions here?
If anybody's got any, sure. Oh, there's one. I just want to support the show. Thank you, Steve and Kyle. Oh,
Thank
Blueberry
you.
Voodoo. How sweet. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Were you having a after show, Steve?
Yeah, Sock Account wants to have an after show. He's really immersed in philosophy, and one of the things he does immerse himself mostly with is moral philosophy. So he kind of wants to do analysis afterwards, and I think Sygart is going to join us.
Okay,
and
maybe
of course,
just
you're more than welcome to join us.
Maybe just let them close out then, and
sure. That'll be on my channel, by the way.
So let's start with the Wizz. You can give us a closeout where people can find you. I know you're on Twitter a lot, so
yeah,
let everybody know to find you on Twitter. And
I'm on Twitter. It's at WizzBiz, biz with 3 Z's. It's a reference from an old show, but Twitter's like my main social media page.
The dumpster fire from hell.
Oh yeah,
you're in most of them.
But I mean, I have like personal social medias that I don't want anyone watching this to ever find. But
they will one day. It's inevitable.
Oh yeah, of course. But yeah, that's about it.
Okay.
All
right. Then our co-host, Godless Engineer, or I'm sorry, Godless Engine Queer.
Godless Engine Queer. Got to get it right. So I'm on Twitter as Godless Engineer, and I'm on YouTube here as Godless Engineer. I'm also on Facebook, Godless Engineering. If you type that into search, you'll find me. And so I hope to have more conversations like this.
Yeah, this was actually pretty good. I gotta admit, it was interesting.
Yes, so sorry for my mic.
Yeah, except for the popping. One last super chat. Wizz text me to say someone is impersonating him.
That is what?
That's from Queenie Upstate.
Yeah, Queenie Upstate.
I do not know what to say to that.
Do you have a queen upstate?
I don't know what that means.
A queen is. I'll tell you off air. We'll have a talk. But
you're gonna have that talk. That's a different show that we'll be having sometime next week, I think.
Yeah. Don't worry, I specialize in these though, so we'll get you through it. I promise. Okay. I was
Thank
getting
you guys for coming in on short notice. Really,
Yeah,
seriously.
definitely.
For what,
You know,
for
I
what
had
you
fun.
guys had the time to prepare, props.
And
Yeah, definitely.
It was laid back. I liked it.
And remember, everybody, tomorrow we'll be having Mad Mike Hughes, the gentleman that shot himself up into the sky on a steam-powered rocket that he built himself. He will be debating whether or not we should have troops. So join us for that tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern. I will not be here because I will be in the bed all day because I will be turning 32. So I will be in bed with a pint of chocolate ice cream and a Jennifer Aniston rom-com. Steve, I'm sure, will do a fabulous job.
Old.
I know. Don't remind me. But
No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
But we'll see you guys tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern.
And we'll see you on the after show in about probably 20 or 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah, that's
All
true. Yeah.
Oh, hey, my computer didn't restart.
Yeah, fuck you, Windows.
Get Linux.